Welcome everybody to good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because I know we have both panelists and I think participants from many different parts of the world. My name's Nikki van der Garg. I'm an independent consultant and a senior fellow at Promundo. And I used to be Director of Gender Justice at Oxfam GB, which is why I've been involved in this particular session, because I'm very excited about the work that Oxfam have been doing on this. But before we start, I'm going to ask Sinead just to do a little bit of logistics. I'm sure some of you will have joined these sessions before, but some of you won't. And Sinead, maybe you can just give a couple of sentences about the symposium itself as well, because some people will be new to it.
Hi everyone, I'm Sinead. I'm Programme Officer with Men Engage Global Secretariat. You're all very welcome today on behalf of Men Engage. We're really looking forward to hearing from this exciting lineup of speakers. So today's session is part of our Ubuntu Symposium, which is our third global symposium. And thanks to COVID, it's now become probably the world's largest virtual symposium, or longest anyway. We've been running sessions since November every week, and we've had so many rich and exciting discussions. So looking forward to another one today. I think that's it from me. I'll pass you back over to Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. And yeah, do put something, if you get stuck, we have a wonderful support team here for the technical side. So please do ask any questions if you're stuck. But yes, as I said, I'm really delighted to be moderating this, which showcases some of Oxfam's long-standing work on unpaid care, and particularly the Women's Economic Empowerment and Care, We Care programme, which was originally the brainchild of Leah Kidder and has operated in a number of countries over many years. And I had the privilege of seeing and being involved with while I was at Oxfam. I think one of the really interesting things about this very grounded work for me is that it links programs with research and policy change and campaigns. And you're going to see that in some of the presentations today. Amber Parks from Oxfam is going to tell you a bit more in a minute, but the combination of these is a really powerful catalyst for change, from household to leadership levels through data collection and analysis and evaluation. It's both structural and individual, pointing to the changes that Alan Gregg has outlined in a paper that he wrote for the Ubuntu Symposium, that individual change is not enough, and we need structural change too. So We Care and other Oxfam work on unpaid care and domestic work, such as GALS, the Gender Action Learning Systems that Marie's going to talk about later on in Rwanda, very much builds on the long-standing work of feminist economists who talked about unpaid care and domestic work that mainly women do as reproductive labour. Professor Diane Elson came up with what's known as the 3 R's framework, which called for unpaid care to be recognised and valued, many of you will know this already, reduced, both through state provision of services such as childcare and through time and labour saving devices, and redistributed between women and men, as well as from individuals to the state. And all of those are going to come up today. There's different ways of working on unpaid care. A 4th R representation was added later to ensure that the voices of women were heard, and a 5th reward or remuneration from the International Labour Organization to try and push states and workplaces to pay for this work. But I wanted to start with just a few minutes on the global context, bearing in mind that we've already had a few sessions on this topic as part of the symposium. It seems to me that the issue of care has been given increased urgency as the spotlight's fallen on care in all its forms during the pandemic in every country. We've seen dire warnings of the threat to gender equality as women and girls often bear the brunt of the pandemic's effects, from frontline health workers risking their lives for others, to parents supporting their children's schooling, to households caring for those who are sick or dying. The pandemic's changed how we live and how we care for ourselves and for our families, our communities, and our planet. But we're a long way from centering care, or valuing it, or sharing it equally, which is why this work today is so important and why men as well as women have to do their fair share. And this isn't about men helping in the home. I've always objected to the word helping in this context, but about radical change in the structures and systems in which inadequately funded care systems are propped up by underpaid care workers, 70% of whom are women, and millions of hours of unpaid care and domestic work that women do in the home. This is a deeply gendered issue, and now's the time to reframe it, to start caring about care. I always like the quote by Indian writer and activist Arundhati Roy, who said, "Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. This one's no different." It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Now, if we're to build that next world, let's put power and money behind it. Let's move away from systems, approaches, and beliefs that are broken. And let's use this opportunity to really imagine the world anew, more caring, more equal, more ethical, and more sustainable than the last one. And I hope this panel will begin to show you some ideas of how that can be done in the context of unpaid care and domestic work. We've got some fantastic speakers from the Philippines, from Rwanda, and from Zimbabwe, who I'm going to introduce before they speak each time. There'll also be time for discussion between them, the speakers themselves, and for questions from all of you in the audience. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Amber Parks, who's the Global Advisor for Women's Economic Empowerment and Care, to talk about Oxfam's work in this context. Amber's work focuses on the intersections of care and inequality, linking national to global feminist research and policy advocacy to shifting norms and policies around unpaid care work. She's worked on issues of women's economic justice and gender equality for over a decade with Oxfam, UNICEF, the Equality Institute, and the Australian government. And I also want to acknowledge Anam Parvez in the background there, another former colleague from Oxfam and another co-conspirator in putting this panel together. Thank you, Anam, for all the work you're doing there in the background. And I'm sure people may well want to ask you questions as well. So Amber, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and hello everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all. So I don't have slides today, so perhaps can take them down if you'd like. So Nikki, I wanted to share a little bit about this question around Oxfam's and WeCare's approach to addressing social norms and structural shifts on unpaid care and domestic work. So Oxfam, together with several partners, including Taurai Men's Forum, who's together with us today, has been working since 2013 in over 6 countries on the Women's Economic Empowerment and Care, or WeCare initiative, which aims to address women's heavy and unequal unpaid care and domestic work as a key cause and consequence of gender inequality. Now, early on in WeCare, we realized that the importance of not only working on public infrastructure and time and labor saving equipment interventions, but of also working on structural shifts to policy change and gender norms, along with building an evidence base and supporting movement building to really move towards a systems change where unpaid care and domestic work is valued and shared and invested in. And so it's really been the combination of these approaches, as you said, Nikki, that has seen successes in WeCare across the years. And so thinking about social norms, particularly at the household level, we've learned a couple of things along the way. For example, our research has shown that it's a combination of infrastructure and social norms interventions that is most important for redistributing care at the household level. And in a recent evaluation in the Philippines and Zimbabwe, we found that it was only when there was access to water and laundry infrastructure alongside work on social norms, particularly with communities, that were really engaging men. And I know our colleagues in Zimbabwe will speak about that later, that it was only when we had that combination that we saw a reduction, not only in women's time on unpaid care work, but then we also saw the increase in men's involvement in care tasks. At the same time, though, our research has also shown that without this continuous work on social norms, these kinds of interventions in public infrastructure and time and labour saving equipment, if we only do those interventions, these in fact can lead to women spending more time on care and domestic tasks. So for example, several years ago in Ethiopia, we saw that some women were actually now being expected to cook 3 meals a day instead of 2 when they had access to more efficient cook stoves. So you can really see the importance of working at the norms level, not just the individual interventions on time and labour saving equipment. We've also seen that in some cases, for example, in Zimbabwe, where equipment such as wheelbarrows had been introduced to help with collecting water, that some men said that they were now less likely to help out because it was now easier for women to do this task and they didn't need men's help anymore. So this critical piece or focus on norms work, where we're really addressing the root cause of the unequal sharing of labour, and that is specifically restrictive ideas of masculinity and what it means to be a man, as well as what it means to be a woman, is really critical to shifting the dial on the distribution of unpaid care work at the household level. And our researchers obviously found that men can, of course, be very positive about sharing unpaid care work, particularly younger generations, and if they see other men doing it. But we know, however, that there are many reasons why this role modelling might not be the case. So in Kenya, for example, our research in 2018 in Nairobi's informal settlements found that almost 3/4 of men had never seen another man wash clothes, and almost 2/3 of men had never seen another man cleaning the house. So that's why some of our work, which has been working with male care champions and cultural and religious leaders, some of whom we have on the call today, has really helped to cascade messages and provide positive examples, really challenging existing perceptions of restrictive masculinity. But I wanted to add too that in addition to working on norms at the individual and household and community level, in We Care and across Oxfam and together with partners, we've also worked really hard to bring in a discussion about norms on the economy. So really challenging the idea that unpaid care work is not work, challenging the idea that it's not skilled, and challenging the idea that care work is women's work. And for this, working with the media, particularly journalists and media houses, has been a key strategy to help shift that public discourse, to shift the discourse from seeing care as just a private issue to one that is a public policy issue. And of course, as you were saying, Nikki, during COVID, the public and media's attention on care work has really confirmed just how essential this unpaid care work is, and that it is actually work. We did do some research during lockdown, which showed that men are indeed doing more unpaid care work during this time, but of course, women are continuing to do the lion's share, so there's still a long way to go. And lastly, just to say, linking back to this last point around the economic norms, for us, shifting these economic norms and narratives alongside norms at the household and individual level, and also working on the policy change and movement building, is really critical to shifting sustainable, transformational and structural change towards valuing equal sharing and investment in unpaid care work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amber, for that great introduction. And if people will have questions for you later, if they can hang on to them, I'm sure you'll be happy to answer them. So we're going to move on to a double session this time. First from the Philippines, where we have Leah Payud, who's Oxfam's Resilience Portfolio Manager. She oversees programs on disaster risk reduction, financial inclusion, climate and energy transition, and women's economic empowerment. I think that keeps you pretty busy, Leah. She's 20 years of experience in the field and a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Community Development, Master of Arts in Teaching Science, and a Diploma in Advocacy and Refugee Rights. And Leah's going to introduce some of the really interesting work they've been doing in the Philippines, but we've also have the honour of having Leah Jasper Candido, who's the Vice Mayor of Quinapondan in Eastern Samar. He's held this post since 2016 and has been instrumental in legislation around unpaid care work, WASH, and the welfare of youth and senior citizens. He was a member of the council in Eastern Samar from 2006 to 2016, and has been Vice President of the National Movement of Young Legislators and Secretary of the Vice Mayors League of the Philippines in the Eastern Samar chapter. So he's been very involved in work in his local community for many years, and Oxfam's had the honour of working with him as well. So I think together we're going to hear some really interesting insights into how they shifted the work in many parts of the Philippines. So Leah, I think you're going to go first, aren't you? I'll give you the floor.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Nikki, and good evening, everybody from this side of the world. If I may start our sharing, especially our sharing experience on how our shift in gendered norms on unpaid care works using campaign and also working with local policy. So if into my second slide, actually we've started this campaign with the inspiration of being part of the solution because we started to gather information through our research In 2017, we've conducted a household care survey in the areas covered by our We Care project. And we found out that in the Philippines, particularly in rural and peri-urban areas, the average of time spent by women on unpaid care work is at 4.5 hours to 6.5 hours for a single task a day. It's actually is coupled or increased to 11 to 12 hours a day when combined together with the supervisory work and other care tasks at home. So when we look at that research, the top three challenging care tasks at home in the Philippines includes meal preparation, taking care of the children and sick member of the family, as well as fetching water. So coming from this context, we were really inspired to work with partners, particularly the local government unit, the private sector, which is particularly the public relations companies, our local partners, civil society organizations, the faith-based organizations, and women's rights organization to push forward for intervention around unpaid care and domestic work. So one of our experience, particularly implementing a campaign, so far we've started with one campaign. So this is the Ilabayo campaign, or it's actually translated to I love you. In the Philippines, it's actually a colloquial term because laba in the Philippines is laundry. So it's actually like usually used by the urban millennials. The I love you also means that portraying a message wherein both husband and wife or partners or other members of the family will have to share the care task. So during this campaign, we uses the platform of the social media, particularly Facebook, and also we've engaged radio show. We've also presented this in TV, in television, and in online media as well. So mainstream media like press releases. And if you can see in the slide, this was captured by the top three media companies in the Philippines, which actually make this campaign very successful. And in fact, it reached 29 million people potential reach with a span of around 1 month, or well, actually it's the first 2 weeks of the campaign when launched. It's already reached that high. During that period as well, this particular campaign was streamed in the domestic airports in the Philippines, where passengers can see as one in their television while waiting for their flight. So this is actually reached in the different parts of the country. So in my next slide, actually, I'm gonna show you this 45-second campaign that we've shown in the social media. So this is the I Love You video. Yeah.
Buti pa sila, merong panlampingan. Buti pa sila, merong pangkilig. Siguro dapat ibalik natin yung dati. Siguro dapat ligawan kita ulit. Hi! Dapat ibalik natin yung lambingan. Ibalik natin yung kilig. I love you. Ang pagkukusa sa gawaing bahay ay pagmamahal sa iyong may bahay. Because care work is teamwork.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you, Anam. As we developed that particular campaign, we worked with a public relations company or PR company, and our journey of engaging them is also not simple. I mean, it's also quite challenging because there's a lot of back and forth in orientation to the PR company, because they also have different perspective on unpaid care work. They have this different line of understanding about it. So successfully, we were able to, inculcate and also influence them on what is the messaging that we wanted to portray. So that's the first campaign, and it was followed by recently, I mean, particularly last year. On my next slide is another campaign, which is we termed it "How I Care" campaign. So it's actually a global campaign, and in the Philippines, we translated it to a local gamification, using a gamification strategy on Facebook. We call it Idol Father, or Lodi Kong Tatay, Idol Father. And we've posted a game, an invitation to everyone for them to post during Father's Day a picture of their father or their brother or their neighbors doing unpaid care tasks. So it was also successful in which we were able to reach, in my next slide, we were able to reach around 22 million as well, potential reach of those who engaged in our campaign. So with this one, we're able to also, because it's a gamification strategy, there are we've given a free lunch, for those winners, the top three fathers who won in our gamification program. So yeah, so it's also, the strategy there is getting people involved. There's a lot of engagement in the comment section, and there's also a lot of stories being told by those who provided their entries. And it's coming, it was spread all over the Philippines. So this 120 entries that we received is representing the Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao part of the Philippines. In my next slide, it's actually also saying that, so yeah, so that's 22 million potential media reach of this campaign. So we engage also in different forum and the government organization to take on the discussion on unpaid care. So in this next slide, this is our learning that as we continue our campaign on shifting social norms, media multiplies reach and impact. So especially that if the messages, so if you are going to tailor that messages that resonate with the practice and belief of local communities, particular groups that enable people to see things from other point of view, and that give people access to new information about the benefit of their action, can really motivate powerful change. And also the social media has a wide reach in the Philippines, so both urban and rural areas. So there are radio posters and banners and review show that can also be easily accessible. So again, our take here is that using of simple language, use the media platform, and also those core messages that resonates the people, and portray a narrative that is positive for both men and women, for them to share unpaid care tasks. So I'm going to stop there, and this is also our privilege to have the municipal vice mayor that will talk also our engagement on the Women Economic Empowerment and Care Ordinance. So the experience, an ordinance is a local law in the Philippines. So currently, when we started the We Care project, we only had 8 local law. So this law enable a sustainable investment on unpaid care, even beyond the project, even beyond We Care. So until now, the We Care project has ended last year. So with 8 local government units enact local policy, but now we already have 28 local government units that enacted this We Care ordinance. So Vice Mayor Leo, on to you.
Thank you, Miss Leah. Good evening from the Philippines to the other parts of the world. I am Leo Jasper Candido, the Vice Mayor of the Municipality of Kinapondan. And I'm going to share to you the Waker Ordinance from the Kinapondan experience. Next slide, please. I will show you a demographic of my hometown, quick facts from the Kinapondan. As you can see in the map, we are in the central part of the Philippines. If you can zoom it in, we are facing the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, as you can see it in the picture. It's the Pacific Ocean. We're a 5th class municipality with a population of 14,779. We have a land area of 8,432 hectares. We have 25 barangays. Some of them are in the upland or mountain barangays. Others are in mainland, and some are in the coastal areas. We have 2,730 household. In our next slide, the question is, how did I become involved in this advocacy on unpaid care work? In 2017, I was invited by Oxfam to attend a meeting with some speakers, and they discussed unpaid care and domestic works. Hearing this orientation, at first, I have a lot of questions and I don't fully understand the concept because unpaid care work is not an issue in our municipality. However, with the persistent invites by the Oxfam and the PRRM, eventually I started to understand the issue, and as a father and as a legislator, I wanted to take the opportunity of my role as a vice mayor, and I have the platform to enact policies on women issues, including unpaid care work. It also caught my attention because it coincides with our local policy in our local government unit to recognize gender equality and women's empowerment. With the help of the technical working group, we formulated a draft ordinance and presented it to the Sangguniang Bayan. Sangguniang Bayan is our local legislative body in which I am the presiding officer as the vice mayor. At first, it was very difficult to convince the other members of the chamber because this defies our social norms. Because women in our locality usually do the houseworks. But when we explain it thoroughly and realized that this law can yield substantial returns in terms of macroeconomic growth, job creation, and other key government priorities, it was approved unanimously in 2018. So the unpaid care work was institutionalized in 2018. In my next slide, I will show you how the local legislation in our locality works. First, what is local legislative power? The local legislative power given to the Sangguniang Bayan or the Legislative Council is that the local government unit can legislate on purely local matters. Although the Sangguniang Bayan or the local council is the long arm of the Congress, we, the local legislators, are more knowledgeable than Congress on matters of local concern and in a much better position to enact context specific and culturally appropriate laws. So, LGU's lawmaking powers are not merely by Congress. God's graces, these are vested by the Constitution. So, these are our legal basis, the 1987 Constitution and the Local Government Code of 1991. So, basically, what is an ordinance? As what Ms. Leah said, an ordinance is a local law of the municipal corporation duly enacted by the proper authority that prescribe general, uniform, and permanent rules of conduct relating to the corporate affairs. In ordinance is also permanent in nature. Next slide, please. So I will discuss to you the of the unpaid care work ordinance. In the ordinance that we formulated, we have the objectives, and we call it the quadruple R framework. First, in the unpaid care work ordinance, we aim to have the recognition, of care work, and a change in attitude towards gender roles. Next is reducing arduous and difficult care task works of women and families. Next is redistributing care in the household and in the community to the state or employees. And last is the representation of carers in the decision making in the government or community. There are parts in the ordinance that there are many parts that consist of the ordinance. On the first part is the data collection. Is the inclusion of community-based monitoring system. We have this system that uh, we employ people to go on every household to collect information and data that pertains to care work, and we also gave them questionnaire to ask on a specific data that will we can gather on the unpaid care work. The
Right,
next
now,
part is the
Candido, sorry to interrupt, just to say just a few more minutes, if that's okay, for your
okay.
presentation. Yeah.
Next is shifting social norms. This is the information dissemination through the Gender and Development Council. Next is the time and labor saving equipment, and the next part is the care services. Next slide, please. So this is the sample of our municipal ordinance. This is the whereas this is the basis of the ordinance. This is the general provisions, and these are the sections which consist the four parts of the ordinance. I am also happy to say that in our locality, even though we have the municipal ordinance, we also have 10 barangays who have also adopted this unpaid care work ordinance. So it's not only in the municipality to implement, but the some barangays are also implementing this ordinance in their own capacity. So next slide, please. So after the ordinance is enacted, the next part is to implement it. So these are the implementation of the local ordinance. Uh, we have investment purchase on TLSE. We give cooking stove, rice cooker, kitchen utensils. Uh, we also have the Municipal Social Welfare Office to lead the discussion on understanding unpaid care work. And the local government celebrated Women's Month celebration with the unpaid care work as theme and care sessions with husbands and wife in the family development session. In the distribution of the TLSE, we also added in the ordinance uh, an ample amount of 100,000 pesos, or maybe in US dollar, it's a meager $2,000 a year. This is to sustain the implementation of projects in providing the TLSE and giving it to the beneficiary that really needed the equipments. So next slide. Becoming a care champion legislator. So basically, one has to understand the current realities and gender gaps. You also have to know the current structure and identify other care champions within the administration. And you have also to institutionalize the local development council to aid in planning and make policies and plans and that addresses women's issues. You also have to build capacities and core competencies of women and provide economic access. We also give some women cooperatives some uh, jobs or works, and we execute plans, we sustain and scale up, uh, and we share the knowledge. So that's all for my presentation, and thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mayor Candido. It's so interesting to hear from someone like you who's done this work, you know, who is there in the local government and who's done this work and who understands it. And I'm sure there'll be many questions to come back to both Leah and to you. I know I've already got a few. I think what we're going to do, just because of time though now, is to go straight on to move quickly. We can't do that physically anymore, but from the Philippines to Rwanda. And I'd like to introduce Marie Garetti Mujawimana, who's an economic justice promoter, and her emphasis is on marginalized community development with a special focus on women's economic empowerment. She's more than 7 years of experience in that field, and she's currently working with Oxfam in Rwanda as Enterprise Development and Livelihoods Officer, also supporting the project working on the strengthening of African women's development and communication network, FemNet, which I'm sure you all know. So Marie, thank you very much for stepping in reasonably last minute as well. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about the GALS program. So
yeah, thank you very much, Nikki, for giving me time to share with you our work in Rwanda and to show you how we are addressing the gender imbalances in households using I will be focusing mainly on two approaches. One is the gender action learning system, and later on I will be talking about investment in unpaid care work reduction infrastructures, but also other different kits. Yeah, so if you can allow me, I will directly share with you about the gender action learning system, which we call GALS methodology. And since maybe some of people who are here are not familiar with the GALS, I will introduce to you to GALS. I will give you a short background about GALS and show you how it works and how we use it in addressing the gender imbalances in households. Yeah, so if we can, so this one, that's what I've been talking about, that I'm going to tell you about the gender action learning system. So this, you might be wondering what is the GALS methodology. So this GALS methodology, it's a community-led empowerment methodology that uses principles of inclusion to improve income, food and nutrition, security of the vulnerable people in a gender equitable way. So this methodology focuses on the promoting gender balance between household members. So the methodology positions female and male as drivers of their own development rather than just being recipient of aids and just being used to receiving grants. But here we teach them to be drivers of their own development. So, so these girls focus mainly on the active promotion of community-led gender justice movement. So on this picture, you can see some of the girls champions that we've been training. So we call them champions, and they are like trainers of other, so they train other people on girls methodology. Yeah, so if you allow me, we can go to the next slide where I'll be showing you how we use the girls methodology as a catalyzing change and action. So I'm going to take you through the process of this girls methodology. So we use it in three main phases. One is the change catalyst workshops. So here we try to map the life challenges within couples or within household members. So they identify the challenges on their development. Then after this change catalyst, we go through the community action learning, where we start to check on the progress around what has been mapped as the challenges. And also we do participatory gender reviews on a certain period of time to check on how we are going through, what we have achieved, and we check on our targets, and we see if there are some changes needed. Yeah, so next I will be showing you some of the tools that we use in the girls methodology. If we can go on the next slide. Yeah, so in the girls methodology, we use drawings because we have identified drawings as an easier way of people expressing themselves using drawings rather than talking about their challenges. So when between, for example, a couple, husband and the wife, there has been some misunderstanding within the family, sometimes it's not easy to just be open and talk about your challenges. But when you go down and draw your challenges, it can be easier to explain your drawings. So here you can see drawings. On the left side is the gender justice or identity diamond. So on this, using this tool, so it can be used by both men and women. On the left side, you can see a drawing of a male, and on the right side, you can see a drawing of a female, where they sit together for an initial consensus between them on the priority gender issues they need to take forward. So one of the examples identified using this gender justice or identity diamond is the unequal property ownership, or the work burden on women, especially the unpaid care work, but also the domestic violence, mainly related to alcohol and drug abuse. So with this tool, people show their challenges they are facing because of the other party. For example, a woman can say that all the domestic activities, I'm the only one doing it, and I see it as a challenge on me, or as a burden on me. So the next phase after this gender justice or identity diamond is the challenge action tree, where they analyze the gender issues and think of a collective action to address the identified challenges. So one of the examples is the analysis of root causes of alcohol and drug abuse by men. So they, with this tool, they can sit together and share about why there is this issue of drug abuse. For example, men can say that maybe you don't treat me well, that's why I don't feel comfortable to come home early, so I prefer to go in the bar and take alcohol. So with that, they can find a solution together. So we can go on the next slide. So once they have identified the problems and the root causes, then they sit together and draw their vision, where they want to achieve. This can be in an economic matter, like in the livelihood, where they want to be. As you can see on the picture, in the red circle, you can see that here they are planning to buy a cow, to construct a house. So then, after identifying what they want to achieve, they also set strategies on achieving their vision together. So once they have done this vision journey, the next step is also to to see how they can share learning on girls with other people. So that's where they use the empowerment leadership map, and they identify, for example, where they can find people to train on girls. So here is the empowerment leadership map on your right side, and it shows how to identify other people you will be training, and also you put a target of people you'll be training within a certain period of time. Yeah, we can go on the next slide. Yeah, so after all this process, so I'm going to share with you some of the change stories that we have seen. We of course have many change stories using this girls methodology, but I have chosen to share with you two stories. One is of this couple you can see here, Celestine and her wife. So as you can see written there, this is, I'm quoting Celestine's words, where he said that during his 16 years of a marriage, he had never been, so he only has been happy for only 9 first months of their marriage. Then all other period of the 16 years, he has not been happy up to the time he started learning about girls and also being open with his wife. And so he said that after learning about girls, now he's living a happy life with his wife. So the problem within this couple has been mainly the drug abuse, because this Celestine has been a drunkard, because he was not really feeling that how his wife likes him, that he couldn't even invest in the asset of the household, because he was saying, if I construct a house, if she leaves me, we will have to separate our asset. Then he preferred to spend all the money just on drinking alcohol. So after learning girls, that's where they have sat together and shared about their issues, also found program together. Yeah, so on the next slide is another change story. Previously, I was sharing with you a story where the husband has been a source of the problem, but here the wife has been the source of the problem, misbehaving, also hiding her income. She had a bank account where the husband didn't know about. She didn't want to share all the income within the household, while the husband was always good behaving, taking care of children, but she has been the one to learn first about girls, then started changing behaviors, also introduced his husband to the girls methodology, and they changed together, made planning together, and also made a vision together. Yeah, so if you visit them now, the picture doesn't show the house they have constructed, but if you zoom in on the picture, you can see that her vision has been to construct a house. So the house, you can see they are standing on the left picture. That is the house they have constructed together. And once it has been achieved, you have to circle it in red. So that's what she's showing on her vision road journey. Yeah, if we can go on the next slide. So apart from using the girls methodology to address the gender imbalances, we also use time-saving devices and infrastructures. On these pictures, you can see the water tap. That is one of the methodology we use so that we can reduce time women spend to go and fetch water. But we also spend on improved cook stoves, which use less firewood. So less firewood means less time collecting firewood. So another methodology is to use the pig biogas. So this pig biogas has been efficient also on involving men in cooking activities, because using biogas, it is, first of all, it is clean, and also it is easier to use, and it is quick. So we've seen men saying that they feel more comfortable to cook some easy meals like rice or boiling potatoes, where before using firewood it was really not, they were not comfortable using this firewood. So on the next session will be to share with you one of the videos. It will be a story about two different families.
Marie, could I just stop you for a second there, because I'm just conscious that we're kind of already out of time. Is it possible to wait for the video? If we have time at the end, is it possible that we wait a little while and show the video at the end?
Yes,
it's about 3 minutes. I'd love you to have a conversation as well, and if we show the video, we won't have time for a conversation. Is that all right with you?
Yeah,
I won't
okay.
forget. I won't forget. I will.
Yeah,
I'll come back.
I will remind you.
You remind me. Yeah. It's an interesting video, but we're already running a little bit late. So thank you so much, and thanks as well to all three of you. I think it's very rare that we get to hear in such detail about the tools and the methodologies and the approaches in two very different kinds of countries and contexts. And I really appreciate, all three of you in terms of your honesty about what you've done and how you've done it. And I think some of the tools that you've used are going to be really, 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 people are already saying in the chat that they find them very, very useful and very practical, because I think very often we talk at a kind of top level, but you've also shared very much your experiences and the kind of positive things, but also the challenges. So I have got some questions, but I wondered, Leah, whether you had any questions for Marie in particular, from the Philippines to Rwanda, whether there's anything you'd like to ask her. And then Marie, I'm going to ask you the same thing of Leah and the Vice Mayor in a minute, if that's okay. So Leah, anything you'd like to ask?
Yes, that's really it's a great sharing, Marie. Thank you so much. I'm just wondering on how do you monitor the change that happened, and there is a case story that you've mentioned, but is there any specific quantitative measurement that you've somehow used? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Leah, for your question. Yeah. So on one of the slides where I've shared about the steps that we use on using this girls methodology. So one of the steps is the reviewing what people has achieved. For example, if you look at one of the tool, which is the vision load journey, it has specific dates. It also has specific outcomes, but of course it is in drawings. So after a certain period of time, most of the time we meet after 3 months, and we evaluate on how we have achieved the set goals and targets. Yeah. So maybe I will also ask my question. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. Sure.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Leah. It was really, really interesting to to see how you are engaging the government. It's really a success story, and it's a learning from the Philippines. And I really liked the video how you are doing the campaign in media. It's something that we've not yet tried here in Rwanda, and it's something that we have copied from Philippines, and we hope to replicate here in Rwanda. So my question is just to ask you how hard or easy has it been to engage with the government? I know in some countries it can be challenging to get the government involved, also bring them in a conference like this one so that they can share a presentation. So it's a success on your side. Maybe you can share with your learning about it.
And perhaps
thank
Vice Mayor Candido can also say a bit more about how he became involved as a representative of a local government too. So
yes.
Just quickly on that one, what were our challenges engaging with local government units? Because not all, local government units have different capacities and understanding. So it really took us also a series of coordination, building partner relations, and really letting them see the evidence. Like it was really important for us to have this household care survey, because it gives them the numbers, it gives them the story behind the numbers, even to let them understand on what's the status of the gender gap in their community, the issues of women in their community. So I think Vice Mayor also shared earlier, Vice, how did you cope? Or how did you convince? So I'm the one asking now, Vice Mayor, how did you convince other members of the parliament in your team?
I think on my part it was not easy because I was the presiding officer, and then they are the members of the council. In our local government setup, it is the majority of the members that will decide. So as the vice mayor, I only have to preside over the session. But I think by showing an example, or by personalizing the content of the ordinance, and explaining it to them that this is how it hit me, and this is how I want you to know the importance of that ordinance. I think in a little way, or in many ways, we can convince many others, not just the members of the council, but many people who can understand the context of this ordinance.
Thank you. I think we're going to have a chance to come back to that question after we've had the Zimbabwe presentations, because I think it's coming up a lot and also relates to the issue that you raised, Leah, about sustainability. So when a program ends, how do you make sure the work continues? Well, one of the ways is to work with people like the Vice Mayor. So we'll come back to that. So thank you for three of you. Really, really interesting presentations, and lots of appreciation in the chat as well. So we'll come back to people's questions there. But I want to move on to Zimbabwe. And again, we have a similar setup, in the sense that we've got an Oxfam speaker, we've got somebody from Taurai, which is a local NGO, and then we have the Reverend Maforo, who's been a pastor who's been working with both of those. So I'm just going to introduce our three next speakers, and then we'll come back to a wider discussion. So Regis Mtutu is the Gender Justice and Social Norms Lead at Oxfam in Zimbabwe. The Reverend Taurai Emmanuel Maforo is a pastor and communicator of the United Methodist Church in Zimbabwe. He provides communication support to the Zimbabwe Council of Churches and participates in advocacy programs on civil rights and social action. He has a passion in ending gender-based violence, early child marriages, forced marriages, and helping the less privileged. He's also a volunteer counsellor for Taurai, the Men's Forum on Gender, advocating for positive masculinity among men inside and outside the church. So welcome very, very much, Reverend. We're very delighted to have you here. And finally, Paul Vingi, he's Programs Officer for Taurai, the Men's Forum on Gender. He's a male activist advocating for gender equality, bringing men and boys together towards a more gender just society in Zimbabwe and beyond. He argues that men need to create and embrace a less toxic version of masculinity based on recognition and respect rather than hatred of women. His greatest passion is bringing men and boys to discussions of feminism. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation and to the subsequent discussion. So Anna, if we could bring up their presentation. And I'm not quite sure which of you is speaking first, so I shall hand the floor to the three of you to start.
Hello, I'll just give, this is Regis, a very quick brief presentation of how we will go. If I could have the next slide, please. Right, so what we'll do, our presentation will hear the motivation from Reverend Maforo around how he got involved in unpaid care work. And then Paul will tell us about community care champions, how they've shifted gender norms and unpaid care work, and how they've involved men, and what have been our main approaches, and what are the key entry points. And then I'll finish off by backing these two presentations by showing how research and evaluations done in Zimbabwe have led to a better understanding of men's involvement in unpaid care work, and we'll share some of the most interesting findings. So I'll hand over to Reverend Maforo. Next slide, please.
Tamazan, can you?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you so much. Mine are perspectives from the lived experiences of the care work. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, I'll begin by a little bit of storytelling of a story of one guy we have named George, not the real name, who wakes up early in the morning to change the adult diapers of his bedridden wife, and change clothes and bedding. Family tried to take away his role from him because they felt a man cannot take care of his wife. Death took away George, leaving his terminally ill wife. That day, neighbors, the community, family, and the church realized the magnitude of unpaid care work he did for his wife. While society seems not to have embraced unpaid care work by men, they are, and I can really assure you, there are some real men out there. And when I mean the real men out there, the men that are really concerned and spend in terms of unpaid care work. Next slide. Okay, the problem area that I need to highlight is that in my advocacy role and participating in unpaid care work and in that advocacy per se, gender stereotyping is the major area of concern for me as a faith leader, as this has a long-ranging impact on the care economy of unpaid work. And why we talk about a care economy, because most of the times we only perceive the economy that brings in the dollars and cents, but that unpaid work that happens in the home, most of the time it is not considered as a critical part of the GDP, the gross domestic product of a nation. But I guess this is something that we need to calculate the figures so that we realize how much unpaid care work is happening in terms of the household chores. And how is that happening? Gender is a social construction, and as such, it is society that has pushed men to the peripheries of the care economy. So it is not, we did not just wake up and say men are not actively involved in unpaid care work. But what we have begun to see, especially when I'm involved in GBV counseling,
we're losing you slightly, Reverend.
issues.
Yeah, we're not hearing you very
Coming
well.
Before you see that society, it is society, the peripheries of the economy. Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
We can now. We lost you for a little while. We got to the care economy.
Oh, okay. The first part of the first bullet, is that so?
Okay. No, I should carry on, but it's coming and going slightly.
Okay, I was talking about gender being a social construction, and as such, it is a society that has pushed men in Zimbabwe to the peripheries of the care economy. So, if men have been pushed by the society to the care economy, into the peripheries of the care economy, it is the society that really needs to work much harder, in my perception, considering the number of GBV counseling cases that I have to go through. These cases continue to come up where the husband and wife conflict on those areas. So society needs to rethink in that line. So the gender norms are therefore, if therefore they are social construction, then we must, as a society and faith communities, underlying faith communities, they have a key role because they have a mass audience for advocacy. So we also need to think the faith communities participating in the unpaid care work issues. Then can we go to the next slide? Next slide.
It's the other way, I think, Anand.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's move forward. Okay, my motivation, I'm almost getting to the close. Let's go to the slide. Yes, my motivation as faith leaders, we cannot ignore the effect of this disequilibrium, because a healthy family system drives a healthy faith community. So we need a balance in terms of unpaid care work happening to both the male and the females at the same time. By the way, we need to understand that scripture says men and women are created in the image of God. It is therefore my motivation to add my voice to the call for gender mainstreaming, and within the context of leave no one behind. Unpaid care work must be accelerated into forward-looking policy frameworks in developing nations. Next slide. In conclusion, from my motivation as a GBV counselor and an advocacy for male involvement or male engagement, in my conclusion, I call upon these Ubuntu conversations to focus on men as participants in gender mainstreaming rather than perceive them as a target group. Because if you see most of the programming that happens, men are seen as a target group. So by perceiving them as a target group, we are not totally engaging our men. We need to see them as participants in the war mechanics, in the matrix of gender mainstreaming. When we see this, if in fact men must be viewed as participants in the unpaid work, then what society views them as helping the women in their work? Who has defined that it is the women's work? It is society that has defined that. So our gender mainstreaming must then now begin to bring men on board, not as target groups, but as active engage and as. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was really inspiring. And yes, I think we'll come back to some of your points as part of the conversation a bit later on, but absolutely take your point about not as a target group and as part of gender mainstreaming. Thank you. And I think the session will definitely pick up on this later on. So Paul, over to you to talk a bit about the work on social norms and unpaid care in Taurai.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nikki. And hello, everyone. If you can just allow me not to share my video, I'm afraid I could lose network. Yeah. So Thanks for affording me this opportunity just to share, the work that we have done in the community with the care champions around shifting gender norms on unpaid care work. Can you allow me to take it to the next slide? Thank you. I'm not going to dwell much on this situational analysis. The Reverend has touched a lot on it. Basically, we're looking at a situation where men have just been socialized, that unpaid care work is a women's work and it's solely to women and they should not play a part. We can skip that slide. All right. Just to also share, the work that we've done with care champions. Basically, what we did is we identified men and women within the community. We took them through a process where we were, capacitating them on unpaid care and domestic work. We call these soldiers of ours the triple C's, which is community care champions. And basically, our main focus on those trainings were around challenging negative masculinities, looking at what it means to be a man in different cultural contexts in Zimbabwe and even and beyond. We were then asking ourselves questions where we are asking what should be an ideal man, what should an ideal man look like in the community. What do societies expect first and foremost from the men in society? What are the boys taught in schools, be it in church, be it through media, through of late, there's been activity around social media platforms. What are the boys being taught in communities and even in their homes in terms of how they should perform and what they should achieve as men around, issues to do with unpaid care and domestic work. Next slide. Our work with the care champions was also then obviously, looking at the background that even the situation analysis that the Reverend gave, it's around masculinity. So our work then was looking at transforming masculinity, seeking then to challenge men and boys to also then get to recognize, reduce, and also redistribute unpaid care and domestic work in their homes and in community. And as we are aware, in many cultures, ideas relating to what is a real man suggest that a real man is the one who does not do any form of care work, as it is, just mainly for women and girls. And those that would also be seen participating in unpaid care and domestic work are also judged, to have been bewitched or they've been given a love potion. In Zimbabwe, there's a saying that says those men are given stay soft. Stay soft is a washing detergent that we use for when we are washing. So there's that saying that says those men are given stay soft. There's also an issue around that those gender divisions of labor. It's also acceptable socially, traditionally and cultural, and is supported by all forms of community leadership, as even the Reverend was alluding to. And it also then ensures that in the household and community level, care work is strictly relegated. It's something that communities do not get to prioritize, as it is just said to be a women and girls issue. And then community leaders such as faith leaders, traditional leaders, and even at times political leaders, who are mostly men, they use their positions in power in community and societies to also then reinforce these social norms that care work is mainly for women's responsibility. And on this behavior, it is male children or any significant in the extended families. Next slide, please. One of our strategies or entry points of engaging men and boys as Padare, we make an effort to also try and engage the boys as they are still young. We have the school programs where we're actually working with the boys in schools to raise awareness on the need to equitable care work. And even as we are working in those schools, we also even get to engage the school authorities around the same thing also, where we're saying equitable school work within school activities that has seen boys not sweeping classes. I mean, it's usually the norm whereby when it's coming to sweeping classes, it's a girl's duty, cleaning toilets is a girl's duty, and serving food during school functions is a girl's duty. And then with the boys, maybe they're told to go to the garden and etc. So we also then try to make efforts to engage school authorities to to shift that mindset to the children as they are still in the learning phase of their lives. And then we also then get to identify men who are trained as care champions, like the ones that we are working with in this project. And we also once capacitated them to make interactions within the community where they were doing door-to-door campaigns, engaging other men, just also to highlight, with other men, so that they also get to recognize and realize that unpaid care and domestic work is actually work, and what comes with unpaid care and domestic work, the burden that also comes with it. And then we also get to engage local community leadership, the faith leaders, the traditional leaders, to be role models and actually get to speak out on the need to share care work. As you heard, Reverend Maforo is a well-renowned reverend when it comes to faith institutions in Zimbabwe, and he has a lot of audience. So we actually get to is one of the leaders that we get to use so that they advocate for the participation of men in unpaid care and domestic work. We also have quite a number of chiefs who are traditional leadership. They also have a huge audience, where we're also working with them as well, just to support the work that we're doing around unpaid care work. There's a lot of how culture gets to handle all these issues to do with the gender relations between men and women. And then we're also training and engaging members of parliament. This is one area that we have actually gone through, where we get to engage the portfolio committees in parliament, to win them over, so that they get to understand what unpaid care and domestic work is all about. It's one new discussion or new conversation that we've actually had to have with the parliament, and so far we have been getting positive responses from the policymakers around unpaid care and domestic work. It's one thing that has not been on the agenda, but it's coming onto the agenda. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. In conclusion, I would, this is our motto, and this is one statement that we get to put, or one message that we get that is targeting men and boys, that we get to put even on our material, that actually says men of quality are not afraid of equality, and real men are non-violent. Thank you. Tatenda. Merci beaucoup. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Paul and Reverend Maforo, for your presentation. I'll just add on to say we have done research and evaluation of this work that the Reverend and Paul have been talking about. And our idea was that we want to better understand gender norms and men's involvement in paid care work. What drives them, and what is it that keeps the gender norms together and the social norms? What is the stickiness of social norms? So in this presentation, I'll share that and also show some of the interesting findings. Next slide, please. We did a study on the gender division of unpaid care labor in Zimbabwe, and we did this in 4 districts of Zimbabwe in September 27, where we had 6 focus groups in 6 wards with 71 people. That is one. The pictures show some of the focus group discussion. We looked at 7 themes: the gender division of labor, how communities value and skill care work, what sayings do they say around unpaid care work, and what is changing, and what do the youth want to see. And in this, we found out there was a very low perception of valuing or skill of unpaid care work. It was seen as natural work and one that does not need skill. But other work in the community, such as thatching, such as plowing and so forth, they are seen as unpaid care work. But we also had sayings that were very positive in terms of shifting social norms. So, for example, in Isindebele, they would say that isikoko sikotwa simanzi. Basically, it means when you are working with a height, you work it while it's still soft. There were also sayings that said that it is important that we work with young boys, and so that we get them young. In terms of what's changing in the aspirations of youth, we also found out that in most of the focus group discussion, there was a very clear demand or saying by adults that they would want their children, especially the newly married, to have gender equitable relationships and to have equitable care work. Next slide, please. So in our research, what we found out are some norms around unpaid care work and roles and relationships. And if you look at that slide, you will also see that women are also gatekeepers. So we heard women saying the kitchen is my domain. It is really what defines me as a woman, and I wouldn't want men to come in and assist me. And also culturally, then this was reinforced by beliefs or norms that says a respectable woman does not rest. She must be seen to be busy all the time. And that then depicts a good woman. And a woman who rests is a lazy woman. And care work is not heavy, does not need skill. And lastly, if you cannot do care work, then you're not a good woman. This was also, in a sense, reinforced by men. As Paul earlier on indicated, it is not manly to do care work. If you do so, you are weak and foolish and have been bewitched. And therefore, it is, most men thought it was degrading to be asked to go and fetch water, to cook, to take care of children. But what we also saw or hear was that for those men, the care champions, they were then very respected in the community, seen as good men. But also, we, as Amber earlier on indicated, we provided time and labor saving equipment, such as wheelbarrows. And if men were going to fetch water using wheelbarrows, it was okay for them to use that kind of equipment. And also the other entry point or the other positive thing was that in most focus group discussion, there was an agreement that a family man is very productive and is one who can provide for his family and also participate to some extent in unpaid care work and assist his family. And a man who could not do that was seen as a useless man who was not productive. So roles are changing, and all the youth felt that they should learn more care work. Next slide, please.
Regis, can I just give you a kind of few minutes of warning to the end so that we have some time?
Okay, I'll quickly move through.
Thank you.
As part of our findings in terms of evaluation, I'll just look at the focus group discussion where we had 9 in Zimbabwe, in 4 districts, where we did this. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So one of the things that came through was that there was a decrease in the number of women who reported that children, girls and boys should support women with care work. So it means that more women are actually in favor of girls and boys sharing equitable care work. Next slide, please. And the other thing as well is that we interviewed children at household level, and we found out there was a decrease in girls reported time on unpaid care work. But what was more interesting was that there was an increase in boys who reported time spent on unpaid care work and an increase spent on paid care work. But there was also a decrease in boys who reported time spent on unpaid care work and a decrease in time spent on unpaid care work. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Adam. Yes, so in conclusion, what we can say is that when we provided time and labor saving equipment, this was a very good nudge to men in shifting social norms, where they've wheelbarrows, where they've jerry cans, where they have solar lamps, it means that they're able to do more. As Amber also indicated, a combination of these strategies, provision of time and labor saving equipment, community mobilization, the kind of work that is Padare doing, influencing community leaders through the work that Padare is doing, approaching chiefs and politicians, works very well. And we're also working with social media and mainstream media is necessary so that we take this approach where we have convinced a few people and now we want to take that to many more people. So from the few to the many. Thank you very much for listening to me and for giving me your attention.
Thank you very much, Regis, and thank you to Paul and to the Reverend as well. I thought that was 3 fantastic presentations from very different perspectives. Yeah, I'm just going to say that we're going to start taking questions and comments from participants in a little while, but I wanted to now make this a very international discussion and to see if Leah or the Vice Mayor or Marie had any questions for the Zimbabwe group. Whether there's anything you'd like to ask them about the methodology or the approaches, or indeed about the whole issue of working together. It seems to me that in all of the examples there's been a real emphasis on the partnerships that you've had, whether that's with the PR company in the Philippines or with traditional leaders or with teachers. That those, or even with yourselves, those kind of partnerships seems to be absolutely key to the success of what you're doing, as much as the methodologies. And I don't know whether there's anything that, Leah, Vice Mayor and Marie would like to ask the Zimbabwe team, either about that or about something else. Leah, do you have anything to come in to ask about?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Nikki. Actually, for the sharing of Reverend was really like motivating and inspirational. I'm just curious as well on is there any based on the experience, is there any pushback as they move into the social norms campaigning?
Hello, Nikki. Can I respond?
Of course, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Like I've said earlier on in my presentation, that the major obstacle before us are the gender stereotypes, which have labeled certain tasks for men and certain for women, and also the fact that there are perceptions that religious people are very perfect, they are pious, they are holy, and sometimes it becomes a very challenging arena to enter in terms of advocacy. But we are making good inroads. I'll tell you some interventions that Padare has done is to have a group of men who are volunteer GBV counselors in the faith communities, so that they then engage faith communities within, because we now have those key participants, lead activists that are working in their relevant faith communities. So that has actually opened gateways for us to push away the norms that have been an impediment previously to achieve these goals. And also the fact that we have seen many even UN agencies and CSOs involving Padare in conversations. That alone has actually brought a different paradigm, because most conversations were done by women. Whenever you talked about gender mainstreaming, it appeared in Zimbabwe as if it's a female subject. But now we are seeing Padare and other men coming in. So the doors are opening up in Zimbabwe. So I'm quite hopeful that as we move forward, Zimbabwe will be a different environment in the future. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Reverend. Very well said. Thank you.
If I may also add, yes, we've had some pushback to the extent that there are a group of men who have actually formed an organization to support and promote men's rights. And this organization is called Varume Shinurai, which means men, wake up, open your eyes and wake up. So there is a pushback in that sense, but also sometimes we do get pushback in terms of the institutions where, for example, where you have gender-based violent cases that have occurred as a result of the expectation that women should do care work. You find that the magistrates, when they pass sentence, it's a very low conviction. There's one low conviction rate and very low sentence. We are also advocating for stiffer sentencing. So they see it as not an issue that a woman has been beaten because she did not perform a care work role. So the magistrates, they push back, they see that is justified, and therefore either ask for a small fine or the person is given community sentence. So those are some of the forms of pushback that we get.
Thank you, Regis. We've learned a lot on that one as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe I could also just add on to some of the pushbacks that we get to have. Regis has touched a bit on it. The issue around culture when it comes to the woman in the domain of the kitchen. You know, in mostly our rural setup in Zimbabwe, we actually have, perceptions, or whether we might call them myth, where they actually believe that the kitchen is a women's domain. And let's say, for example, if you are a man and you're in the kitchen and then you break the plate, it's actually considered as a taboo, and there will be a fine that comes with that. And then to such an extent that also, even let's say, for example, a woman dies, the kitchen, everything in the kitchen is taken back to her, to her relatives, to her home, because it's said that everything in the kitchen is just identified by the woman. It's the only place where the woman feels she has power and control over. So that thinking also then gets to be a bit of a pushback, because men will then say, if I go there and then things then come back to me, how it is like with beliefs. So it's also something around that gets to be a pushback. I'm not sure if you also have the same myth and perceptions around that in the Philippines or even in Rwanda. Thank you.
I think that's a good question, Paul. I don't know if Marie or the Vice Mayor or Leah would like to come back on that question, because it seems to me those things are really difficult to shift. Okay, maybe not. We've covered such a lot of ground. I think it's hard to know what to ask, because you've been working on so many different aspects of this work. I'm wondering, one of the things that you've talked about in the Zimbabwe presentation was the work with care champions and the changes you've seen with boys and girls. I wonder if it's a question for all of you, I guess, is do you think there's going to begin to be some kind of generational shifts? Because I know that, for example, Payud has been doing this International Men and Gender Equality Survey in many different countries, and one of the ones that they did in the Middle East, there was actually evidence that the younger generation of men had more rigid social norms around some of these things than the older generation. So I'm interested in the Philippines and Rwanda and Zimbabwe, whether that shift is happening with the younger generation or whether there's any pushback. I don't know if anybody wants to answer that question.
Alonige.
Hi.
I think the pushback as regards to young boys, it simply goes back to their fathers and the uncles who are grooming them. And also my perspective is that we remember there is a time that we so much emphasized quite a lot in that front in empowering the girls. And in the process, we left out the boys. So now we still have a challenge. I face this when I do premarital counseling, that we have a young girl who is quite empowered, and yet the boy is not as empowered. They still hold on to the traditional norms. So I appreciate the advocacy that was done for the girl child, but leaving out the boy child, we made we missed quite a lot there, because it is the boys that need to, in their socialization, work together with the girls. So when we left them behind, now these are the teenagers, these are the young adults who are now about to get married. They have not changed. So that had become a pushback, because we focus just on the girl. So now the programs where we are saying now catch these boys young, is to try at least put them at the same degree of empowerment like the work that has already been done with girls.
Thank you. That's a really, really important point, and I think there's an increasing call to start young as well. Does anybody else have any observations on that point in terms of pushback and generational change?
Yes, Nikki, thank you. I think, well, getting to the question of the younger boys getting to accept and getting to and understand unpaid care work, there's definitely the shift is there. One setback that is there is, in Zimbabwe we have a traditional process where when a man and woman are getting married, a man is supposed to pay the bride price. We call it lobola. So that process now is being commercialized to such an extent that we also then get to have these young men who believe that, because of that process and the amount of money that are paid for this process, then things like unpaid care work, they should be given. I should not be participating into it. So you find with the pushback there is that process of it's a good traditional process, but it has now been commercialized to such an extent that you then get to have boys then challenging the whole process again to say, but look, if I'm going to be doing ABCD, why should I be paying 10,000-15,000 USD just to marry? So that's one huge pushback. But otherwise, in terms of acceptance, the younger men, they get to accept it better than the older. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one more question of you all in terms of chair's privilege, facilitator's privilege, and that is, Maria, you were talking as well about sharing pictures of working with young men and young women. Do you all have approaches where you work with men separately and women separately, or do you work with them together? And which do you think? I think you probably need both, but I'm interested to hear what you feel about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Nikki, for your question. Yeah, so in terms of working with boys and girls and or men and women, so maybe to share with you using our girls methodology, most of the time we put them together. We don't separate them, so we put them together. But there comes times when there are some sensitive cases where women feel more comfortable to just be in their own group so that they can be more open, and also men put in their separate group and share within themselves. Then afterwards we put them together and share among themselves. But most of the times we work with them together. So maybe if you can also allow me, I can comment on your previous question on pushback on among the young generations. So here in Rwanda, you consider there is some level of acceptance in young generations in terms of involvement in paid care work. Yeah, but we cannot really say that we've arrived there. There is still a way to go. But if you compare with the older generation, there is some level of acceptance and change compared to the elder ones.
Thank you, Marie. I haven't forgotten about your video. I just want to see if anybody else wants to come back on that question, or anybody else has any questions they want to ask the other panelists before we do that.
Okay, if I could come in, Nikki, on the previous question. Like I said, our research clearly showed that parents of young people would want their children or the youth to have a different lifestyle from what they are going through or what they went through. So there's that desire for change. But also the young people are changing, as Paul said, but our experience also shows that they are the most difficult to change. They hold on to tradition, to culture, which they are not very familiar with, or if you would ask them, they would not know where it is coming from and how we arrive at some of those myths or cultural beliefs. It is much easier to work with the older men. They are prepared to change and they are prepared to stand their ground in terms of doing care work and earning the respect. So we need to really do more work in the schools to actually try and engage men. The newly married boys, young men, are really one of the key areas where there's pushback because of the lobola that Paul indicated. And one of the things that we are thinking about together with Padare is to actually start what we would call a husband school. Young people are expected to be married as men to head the household, but they don't know how to do it, and there's no way where they are taught to do that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, in Zimbabwe, we don't really have the rite of passage for young men and for young women, for most cultural, for most ethnic groups, except for those that come from Malawi or that came from Malawi a long time ago. They do have the rite of passage, and the same as the Xhosa, or who are originally from South Africa. So we are thinking of idea of starting a husband school where we will go through several sessions around engaging them on around what makes a good husband, what defines a real man, the kind of work that Maria Garetti spoke about under girls in Rwanda. Would also want to do more work with couples. Part of the K Champions is that we have what we call model couples who are working together, who are sharing equitable care work openly, and they actually also engage members of other communities around how they've worked. And we see that the model couples that work together, they are also doing much, much better economically. They are more economically empowered. So I'll stop there. I had a question for Maria Garetti to actually say, how do you identify the couples that will come to work? I think it would be very difficult for a man who is married and his wife to just come and say, look, we have a problem, I drink too much, or the wife says, I'm not to it. How do you actually identify that this couple is right or is ready for engagement?
Yeah, thank you, Regis, for your good question. Yeah, actually, it's really a challenging step because in the beginning, you will find that some of the people are somehow reluctant to be involved in these girls' trainings, but one of the criteria we use is to identify couples or household with conflict. So we work together with local leaders, and they help us to identify those couples with conflict. And we also use other previous girls champions, and we approach them using those girls champions. We share change stories through their peer community members, and of course it's a long process. It sometimes take like the whole year people thinking about it to join the program. Yeah, but at the end of the time, when they see changes in especially in economic matters, when you see that people are changing economically, that's when people start to be interested in the methodology and come step by step. Yeah, thank you.
Really useful, Marie Garetti. Thank you very, very much. I have promised you to show this time and labour saving device thing. We have one question for the vice. I'm just looking at the time. We've got 10 minutes. Let's do the question for the Vice Mayor first, and then Marie will come back and show your video, because there have been a number of comments about the usefulness around time and labour saving devices. So Vice Mayor Candido, I don't know if you can see Amber's question. She says, have you noticed any changes in the attitudes of your fellow policymakers and or constituents following the introduction of local care ordinances? It's a really important question.
Yes, hello. With my fellow legislative workers, yes. Because when we approve certain ordinances, we must be well versed of it. If possible, we could be the role model of it. So I think there's a positive change that happened upon approving that ordinance. And when it comes to the beneficiaries or the people that we help through this ordinance, once we give them the time labor saving equipment as an intervention, in a way, we help them lessen the burden of their housework, that they could do other things such as selling fish or making income for their family. So it helped a lot for the people that we are serving.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful answer to that question, because it's really important in terms of how you influence. Marie Garetti, do you want us to show the video? Because I want to keep my promise.
Okay, let me.
I could ask Anna. I think you've got the link too, haven't you?
Yes, give me one second.
Yeah, because there've been quite a lot of comments in the chat box around the importance of time and labour saving devices, which is obviously part of the 3 R's, and it's about men getting comfortable using them, but also how you shift the norms. And I think this little video on pig poo power in Rwanda will show that too. So thank you, Anna.
Nitwa Manirafasha Christina. Mu gushaka ibyo guteka nkoresha umwanda w'ingurube nkoresheje biogas. Nabonaga nta kintu bizabyara pe, nkabona bari kubaka, nkavuga ni isuku tuzacana. Uravanga, wamara kuvanga ukabyohereza hano muri iki gihema, byo bigasigara byicagagura, wewe ukagenda ukaja gufungura ukareba ko gaze yageze. Ubwo mbere yaho ntarakora batari baduha biogaze, guteka nkakoresha inkwi. Iyo ndi guteka ntekesha, nshobora guteka ibiryo birahira nk'isaha, bigahira mu saha 2. Bishya bifite impumuro itari nziza, nanjye ubwanye nshobora kurwara kubera ya myotsi.
Nagiye gutaje binwara amasaha, natagiye gutaje ibintu abandi kwiga. Mu gihe natagiye gutasha ntabwo twabona ibyo gutekesha ngo turye.
Ariko kubera tuba twabuze inkwi twabirya ari bibisi kubera ko biba bidahiye. Iyo tuburaye urabyumva nawe ntidusinzira, umubiri ukumva ko nta kintu uri gufata, ukumva ko umubiri uba wabuze vitamini nyine ukumva ko nta mbaraga. Ubwo mbere yaho ntarakora batari baduha biyogaze, imishinga yanjye imwe yarapfaga. Naradodaga, sinabonaga umwanya wo guteka ngo njewe no kudoda. Impinduka ku buzima bwanjye, nk'ubu mu gutera imbere ndi kwivura. Gutera imbere inkoko ntazo nagiraga ndazifite, na dendo ndi gushaka kuzorora ku buryo bwinshi, muri kubona ko natangiye. N'umuriro, ipoto twarangije kuyishinga, umuriro ugiye kuza mu rugo. Nkomoje kuri uko kudata igihe cyo guteka.
Thank you, Anam, and thank you all for sitting there for 2 hours. I know in the Philippines it's really late at night, so I particularly appreciate you staying up so late. But I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I hope that you can continue it offline, because I actually think there's so much. I've learned so much. I think there's so much from all of us to learn from the experiences of other countries and other ways of working on this issue. I want to give Sinead a final word, because I promised her I would. But just to thank all the speakers again very much, and thank all the participants for sitting with us for so long. Sinead, can I hand over to you now?
Yes, thank you so much, Nikki, and thanks to all the speakers for such a lovely session. I just wanted to say very briefly that the recordings of the session today will be available in a couple of days on the Men Engage YouTube channel, and also on the Symposium app if any of you have that. And I'd just like to very quickly just do a little bit of promotion for what's coming up in the Symposium next week while I have you here. 1 second. Great, hold on. So next week coming up, we have sessions every Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. You should all be on the mailing list now if you've registered for this session. And next week we have the launch of our new youth strategy on Tuesday. We have a session on backlash and radicalization on Wednesday, as well as another session on the politics of care. And next Thursday coming up, we have a number of parallel sessions, including developing a feminist framework for working with men and boys. Another conversation space on backlash, which we'll be hosting. One on the masculinist logic of protection in India. One on the past, present and future of engaging men and boys in SRHR. And another on transforming masculinities from restorative practices. So I hope to see some of you there in the rest of our sessions. And yes, so if you go on to menengage.org/symposium, you'll get the full program and agenda, and you can register for the sessions there. That's it from me. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Sinead, and thank you very much to the technical team for supporting this. Particularly, there's always some kind of glitch. So Tamazan, much appreciated, unhosting people and rehosting people and unmuting people. Yeah, I hope you all stay in touch, and yes, I'll let you all go to bed or to have your meals or to have your tea or whatever you're doing now. So thank you. Bye-bye.